Hi, I'm Wayne Cavuto. I was born in Rochester, New York in 1955. I just turned 70 years old. I'm here to tell you my story. So I lived in a great neighborhood, a lot of friends and a lot of activities, sports, hide and go seek at night, if any of you can refer to that. At 10 years old, these are the kind of things you're doing as a young boy. And we just had a ball. And so there were always things you did at that age, like shovel somebody's driveway, wash their windows, a neighbor or somebody down the street, somebody in the area might, say, hey, get a couple of those boys to come over and we'll get this garage cleaned out or we'll do something. And it just so happened that there was a gentleman a couple doors from where I lived, and some of my friends were going over there and they were doing those kind of little odd jobs, something you could do at that age. And so I was asked at one point, hey, do you want to come over and kind of, do some chores there? I said, yeah, I'd love to. And so I went over with a friend of mine, and then he asked me to come over at another time and rake his front yard and pick up all the leaves and stuff like that. And unbeknownst to me, a 10-year-old child, who's innocent, not thinking anything other than I'm going to make a few dollars and it'll seem like a lot of money, I wound up doing that, and he invited me in the house. And so, of course, at that time, there wasn't the threat that maybe we experience today. And, you go in the house and you're not threatened by, getting a pop or a couple cookies or something like that. This is somebody that lives close by, that's in the neighborhood. So there was no threat or concern for me at all. And so when I went in and I was there for a little bit of time, the grooming started. And there were different things that he said and he started to do. And before you know it, I was in a place where I was being violated. And that was just the beginning of hell for me at 10 years old. Because in my day, you never spoke about this. You didn't tell people about it. It was something that you'd live with, you deal with. You deal with the pain, you deal with torment, you deal with whatever it might be. And so my life got set up at 10 years old where, as a young boy, I was very fragmented. My mind was no longer an innocent child. My mind was tormented with thoughts and things about what happened. I couldn't interact with people like I used to. I could fake it, but inside I was just full of pain, full of pain. So at 10 years old, as I continued my journey, I found myself in a very, very uncomfortable place. And by the time I was 12 years old, I was addicted to pornography. I had gotten access to pornography. I hid it, and I made sure that became my companion for a very long time. And I didn't know how to deal with all the things I was dealing with, but that's what I was exposed to at 10 years old. So I already had a perverse nature, and I was just a young boy. Having sex at 13 and 14 years old, maybe is more common today, but it wasn't as common then. And I just continued down this road, and other things developed. I developed anger. I was depressed. I put on a show. I put on a face. I did a lot of hiding. There was a lot of shame. There was a lot of discomfort. There was a lot of me not being me because that boy was stolen at 10 years old. He was gone. And now something else had resurrected in my life that was not what I expected. And especially as I got older, looking back, that was not the little boy that was innocent prior to that molestation. So my anger became something that I used as a form of medication. I was angry, so I would beat people up. I would stir up trouble. I loved to fight. I loved to get in fights. I loved to express my anger because that was a way of me releasing my pain. Some people release their pain through alcohol or cutting themselves. There's different ways that people release their pain. There's different ways how people approach different circumstances in their life, and trauma that they've experienced. But for me, that was my thing. Rebellion was huge. I hated authority figures. I hated people that were going to tell me what to do. No one was going to tell me what to do. And if you did, we were going to fight. It didn't matter if you were a teacher, a father, a friend, a stranger. It didn't matter. That's where the root of everything came, from that molestation. And I was just acting out because I had nowhere else to go. So by the time I hit 15 years old, I had been in junior high school for 3 years because I didn't pass one year. I stayed in and went back the next year. I was kicked out of school, I don't know how many times, because I could not focus. Teachers thought I was ADD. No, I was traumatized at 10 years old. It wasn't ADD. And so I continued to go down this road of rebellion and not being able to focus and lack of any self-control in my life. I had none. So at 15 and a half years old, I wound up leaving school and I never went back. My father had just purchased the second 7-Eleven in Rochester. He wound up in the grocery business. My father was a fantastic man, a businessman. He was a great father. He was very square. When I mean square, he wasn't anybody that would do anything illegal. He stuck to the books. He did what he was supposed to do, and he obeyed the law. And by the time I was maybe 16 years old, I'm working for him full time. I'm making money. And he just said to me, look, he was old school Italian. And the way they did business was, if you don't want to go to school, then you're going to work. And I'm going to show you how to work. I'm going to show you what work really is. And so he worked me, but he taught me a lot about business over the years. But at that age, he said, I'm going to show you what work is. So I went to work and I started getting, full paychecks and thought, wow, this is amazing. Look at the money I'm making. But my life was still a mess. I was tormented. I still was acting out. I was drinking. I was smoking. I was doing psychedelic drugs. I was doing things in my life to try to self-medicate, to give myself some sense of relief. And I couldn't find it. There was nowhere I could find it. And at 17 years old, I had a friend that was very interested in something I had, just a stereo system, very innocent. Hey, I want to buy your stereo system. Blah blah blah. And one thing led to another, and he said, well, I can give you 200 hits of this mescaline. And mescaline was like acid, so it's a psychedelic drug. It was very popular then, with all the hippies and that kind of background then. And it was really popular. And what wound up happening was those 200 hits of mescaline, because of the environments that we were in, we used to gather together at different locations and different places where there'd be 100 people at once. So the stuff was gone. It was like candy. It was gone in like an hour or two. And I was like, wow, can I get some more of this? I just made $400. And at that time, the paycheck that I was getting, it was nowhere near that. And now I'm going to maybe make another $400 tomorrow and maybe the next day. I just got real excited. So something that was very innocent, but because I was prone to breaking laws and not doing the right thing, I immediately went in that direction. And I became very focused. And I knew exactly what I wanted. Money, 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 money. And I pushed and I pushed and I pushed. And by the time I was 17 years old, I was selling quite a bit of drugs and stuff and guns and everything else. I was using my father's business to do these kind of things. I had people that would bring me, stuff that I could sell, whether they were guns, whether it was drugs, it didn't matter. I had a lot of connections. And so by the time I was 19 years old, I was considered to be one of the top 10 drug dealers in Rochester or Monroe County. So as I continued down this road using my father's businesses, which were very legitimate, and it was a nice shield for me, it was a nice place for me to hide behind, even though, the detectives and the narcotics officers and the Federal Drug Administration, these people knew what I was doing because they had been sitting on me for a long time, watching me again and again and again, and they knew what I was up to. But as I continued down this road, I just felt that I could outsmart them, which was a mistake. You can't outsmart them. But the lifestyle, because in time they'll grab you, because when you're sleeping, they're going to get you somewhere at some point. But this lifestyle was no joke. I mean, my life was put in danger many, many times, as you can imagine. And there was one particular incident that happened where I was on one side of town and we went to what we call crosstown. And I went crosstown, we were in the projects, and we were just all, you know, in a living room, just kind of hanging out, partying, doing our thing. And there was a gentleman that was out on furlough that was there, but he wasn't present with us. He was with his girl in the back room. And we noticed, and it wasn't anything that was a shock to us or we have to go rescue somebody. He was not being kind to her, to put it kindly. He was beating her up. He was doing all kinds of stuff. And at some point, when he exhausted his anger or whatever it was on her, he came out in the living room and he stood directly over me. And I looked at him and he started to just speak and call me all kinds of names and stuff like that. And I knew this is confrontation. I got a problem. And in that moment, I thought, I got to stand up, because he had a meat cleaver in his hand. And I got to stand up and turn to my side, because I figure if he strikes me, I didn't want to have my whole frontal body exposed to him. So I turned and I was going to put myself in a position where he wasn't going to be able to chop me up. And in the moment, in an instant, all of a sudden, I was gone. I wasn't there. I found myself in another part of the projects. I was outside of the living room, outside of the apartment, and I was standing outside, and I'm like, almost like, what just happened? But then I came to my senses. As a criminal, I ran to my vehicle to get a weapon. And on the way there, getting close to my vehicle, I stopped. And I said, this is crazy. I'm not going back in there. I'm going to go cross town. I went back cross town, and I got some people from cross town. We went back, and he was gone. So this lifestyle just continued. But God had his hand on me. I didn't know it. I didn't understand it. But he was keeping me from harm's way. As I continued to sell drugs, there was a gentleman that was put on my case that I wasn't aware of, but he got in through some circumstances, some people that I knew that I trusted, and he got in and got real close to me. And he expressed his interest because of the type of deals I could do, the amount of drugs that I could purchase. He wanted me to help him because he had a shipment that had got intercepted, and this was his story. And he was supplying 19 colleges around the country. And so he was looking for me to put him in a position where he could make more money and it could take care of the business at hand, because he had nothing to offer these students in these colleges. So I told him, hey, no problem, let's make it happen. And because I trusted him because of the people that brought him to me. Well, one thing led to another, and in due time, what happened was I couldn't get what he asked for, which was very abnormal. It was very abnormal for me not to be able to find myself in a place where any wells dried up or people that had influence and had power, that I wasn't able to get those things that were necessary to accomplish what I wanted to, which is more money. More money, more power, more influence. Because now I picked up a guy that's got 19 colleges. Well, how many other deals does he need to make? So I was looking at this like, this is just gravy on top of what I'm already doing. Well, we continued to talk. I continued to investigate and find out, why can't I get this stuff? Well, it was just God's hand again of protection. So this gentleman came to me one night. We used to meet quite a bit. We used to talk, about things and talk about business and all that. And he was very knowledgeable, and had all the proper language or lingo that is necessary for somebody that's to be in his position. He was playing his role very well. I didn't know that at the time. So one night he asked me, hey, can we meet? Can we meet at your place? And I said, sure. So, it was typical. That's what we did. And sometimes we'd even get high together. And so So he met me over there, and we sat down, and he started to talk to me. He says, you know, I got to tell you something, and I got to share something with you, and you're going to be very surprised. So I'm like, okay, come on, bring it on. So we sat down, and he had this folder in his hand. And he took the folder and he put it down in front of me on this coffee table. And he said, do you know these people? I go, of course. I go, what are you doing with this? What is this? And he said, all these people here are all on our hit list, the Federal Drug Administration. That's who I work for. And he goes, all these people are on the list, and you're supposed to be there too. He goes, and I'm telling you right now, I have no idea why I'm doing this. He said, but you're getting one chance. And he says, you have 2 days and they're going to be here. And the way that they're going to arrest you and what they feel they're going to get from you is what they call a Class B felony. You'll serve no less than 15 years and no more than 25. So they wanted to make sure they took me off the streets, got a good conviction, something very concrete, was really solid. And so here I am, just like almost breathless at this guy that I totally let in, because I was great with sniffing things out, making sure people didn't get close to me that I didn't know. But the influence, where it came from, I trusted somebody that was very close to me. And they made it in. He made it in. So now I got 2 days to clean up my act. I got to make sure that there isn't nothing. He said, don't even have a marijuana seed on the ground. Nothing at all. Top to bottom, clean it up. So I said, okay. So I went ahead and did what he said to do. Obviously, I used my own creativity and my own experience to go ahead and make sure that things were right. So I had an idea. I don't want them to catch wind at all that I might have got some information, because I didn't want to make it look like I shut my business down or I stopped for a minute. So what I did was I turned around, and my brother and I and some of my friends, we staged, a drug day. We made it look like we were picking up, we were dropping off, we were making deals, and so on and so forth. And the next day, when we came to day 2, when I came back into my place of residence, when I was headed back in, I could see where they were parked, and they were waiting for me to come back, and then they were going to hit me. They were going to get me at that point. So when they got all done and they found nothing, they were really frustrated. There were 2 narcotics officers that were on the FDA that were just furious. So they played good cop, bad cop, and one of the cops, everybody left, and one of the cops stayed, and he said, look, I just you and me, I just want to have a conversation. He goes, who tipped you off? Because they knew the way and the money and the time that they invested in me, that they had me, that they knew exactly what was going to happen. And it didn't happen because of God's intervention. God was setting the stage for me to give me another chance. That man gave me another chance, but it was through God touching his heart and him not even understanding, why would I, being in the business, let somebody go that's part of a hit list of the 10 biggest drug dealers, in this area. Why would I do that? The only way he could have done that if God did something in his heart. And so he was giving me a chance. God was working through him to say, I'm going to give you a chance to make the right decision. So what happened was, when everything was said and done, my brother and I had a plan that we were going to take everything out of the house, put it on a truck. We had everything in place. After that, I needed a safe house. I went right to my parents' house after that. And I sat down with them. I shared with them the whole story. I told them exactly what I was doing. My father did have some idea that I was up to something. He wasn't sure what, because I was really good at masking things and making them look a certain way. So my father gave me a choice. He said, well, if you want to come here, you got 2 choices. I'm going to rehabilitate you, or you're going to jail. It's your choice. And at that point, I made a decision. I made a decision to clean house, to stop. I shut the business down. I shut everybody down. I told them I'm done. I'm out. And so for 2 years after that, being with at my family's house, trying to clean up my act, getting sober, finding a place of rest and health. That's what I did for the next 2 years. The rehab was you have to reestablish your name. You have to learn the value of money. You have to restore to yourself some worth as a person, as a human being. And I was all in. I was like, yeah, I want to do this. I didn't want to go to prison. I didn't want that to be the 25 years of my life. So I was all in. And so my father started the process. And it was not easy. It was ugly. I had to work 70, 80, 90 hours a week. I had to listen to constant lectures about being a man and not being a drug dealer and having value in myself and learning, about myself and really facing me. Because once everything was gone, I really realized how insecure I was and how lost I was. But in the process of going through this, he didn't know, but I still had a drug problem. And I was sneaking just a little, just enough. I had people still coming around looking to buy drugs from me. I told them, hey, this is not me anymore. I'm not doing this. But I said, hey, I need a little something. So I would just get enough so that I could take care of my own issues. So I was really in the midst of it all. I was still very bound. I was not free, even though I escaped, and I had an opportunity not to go to prison, and I wasn't selling drugs anymore. I was still in bondage. I was still hurting. I was still lost. I was feeling the insecurity and didn't feel whole. I was getting great help from my dad, a lot of influence from him. Things were making sense, but there was a component that was missing, and that was Jesus. And there was a gentleman that was coming in my store. One of the stores we had businesses. And one of the businesses we had, there was this gentleman that was coming in on a regular basis. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about this gentleman. He was somebody I used to sell drugs to. But he came in the store one day, and he came up to me and he said, and I was shocked to see him because he looked different and he was acting different. And he said to me, he said, do you know Jesus loves you? And I was like, get out of here with that mess. I'm like, are you kidding me? When I heard that, it was like the corniest thing I could have heard at the time. I didn't know it was the greatest thing that I could receive and I could hear. I needed to hear that. So this man was relentless with the love of God in his heart for me. And he continued to come to the store. I told him, I'm going to kill you. I'm the devil. Don't touch me. Because he used to want to pray for me and put his hands on me. I was like, don't touch me, dude. I'm the devil. I'm evil. You don't blah, blah, blah. And just that kind of behavior towards him. But what he was saying was gnawing at me. It was gnawing at my thoughts. It was gnawing at my spirit. I didn't understand why I would go home at night and I would think about what he said. And it started to make sense. It really did. So over a period of time, and this was a 2-year process, this guy was coming in. And I'm still drug addicted. I'm still having issues. And I remember one night I'm sitting outside. It was wee hours in the morning. I was sitting outside of the business. And I looked up into the sky. And I said, God, if you're real, you need to reveal yourself to me. Because what he was saying was definitely poking at my curiosity and poking at my insecurities and poking at my life in such a way where the insecurity was saying, if you're real, I need security. I need to be free. I was desperate. I was desperate. But still, it wasn't enough at that time. I'd made my request known to the Lord. And I didn't understand how he'd work that out. I didn't know him, so I didn't know how he operates. But I pleaded with him. So this gentleman continued to come in the store. He invited me to a church service. Now, I'm not talking about typical church like we go your traditional church. This was somebody, an evangelist coming through town who was well known, who was going to be at the Auditorium Theater downtown Rochester. And I said, okay, I'll go. Because he had harped and bugged me so much. But inside, I still had curiosity. I wanted to go and see. And I went, and I was in the service, and he gave an altar call. And I went up. I did everything that they said to do. I left. We got in his vehicle. He was all excited, blah, 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 blah. I said, dude, nothing happened. I don't feel any different. I don't even know if I believe this stuff, man, because nothing happened. Well, he was just the type of guy that had such zeal for the Lord, and he was so on point with God. He just continued to speak positive. He didn't go down that road. He didn't say anything negative. He just continued to love me and so on. Well, some time had gone by, and being at my parents' house, the safe house that I needed, I had a hole downstairs of a house. It was like my big apartment. And one day, I'm getting a knock on my door that turns into a lot of knocks, and it's my little sister telling me that I have to get up and take Mom and her friend to a crusade in Utica, New York. So I'm like, oh no, no, this is not happening. This is not happening. Now, I was still a very angry person. I was still dealing with a lot of my emotions. I was cussing my little sister out. I was angry, so I needed drugs. I needed something to calm me down. So I figured, well, if I'm going to take them, because I committed, and this is my mom, so I'm like, I'm going to go, but I got to get high first, so it would be okay. I'll do it, and I'll get over it. I'll get her there and then dump them off, because that's my mentality. That's the way I was. I'll dump them off, and then I'll go take care of me, and I'll get high until they're done, and I'll do what I want to do, and then I'll pick them up. So we proceeded to go to this crusade in Utica. Well, when we got there, the building looked like it was empty. There was like not really anything out front. There weren't people. And I was like, Mom, are you sure you got the right day? So now I'm disturbed because I've driven there. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is just going to be a mess. So she said, no, today's the day. They said to come early because there's a lot of people that are going to show up. Okay, so I said, well, stay in the car. I'll be right back. So I went around the building. I'm looking around. So now my criminal mind is, I got to get in this building because maybe somebody's in there. So I find a way to get into the building. I get into the building, and there's a crew inside, and they're hooking stuff up and doing things, whatever. So I just make my way to the front door. I opened the door. I said, okay, come on. I told them, come on in. So my mother and her friend, my mother's going, well, are we going in now? Are they open? I said, oh, yeah, I know the guy here. Come on, I'll take you up front. I got you great seats. There's no one in any of the seats. There's no one else there except the guys that were setting up. So I take them down. She didn't want to sit in the front row, so she sat in the second row. So I'm getting ready to leave. I'm going to take care of me. It's time to do drugs. It's time to take care of my problem. On my way out, a gentleman stops me who I recognized from TV. And he was one of the singers in this group that I used to see. And I literally used to mock the evangelist and these people in 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning when I was high with all my friends. Because at that time, TV wasn't the same. You had these shows that were on at 3 and 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning because it was real inexpensive for them to get airtime. And that's when they were on. And it was a great time for sinners because that's when they're still up. So I mocked this evangelist and this ministry for a long time. So here this guy starts talking to me. Hey, what's your name? Before you know it, I don't know how the time lapsed. Him and I just started talking. We talked and talked. Before you know it, all these people start coming in. And I felt like I couldn't get out. Almost like, you got to go sit down. So I said, well, I'll go sit down. So I went up to my mother and her friend, and I said, I'm going to sit here with you guys. They go, okay. And at that point, when things filled in and they started the process of the ministry, at one point, this minister said, I don't care if you're addicted to NyQuil, if you're addicted to heroin, if you're addicted to crack cocaine, alcohol, whatever you're addicted to. He said, if you want your freedom, he said, if you want your freedom today, today's the day. He said, get up here right now. And I felt like there was somebody underneath my seat and shot me up, like I sprung out of that seat. And I remember the demeanor, the way I felt. I looked at my mother almost like a little kid. And I said, Mom, I got to go up there. And when I ran up on that platform, I got lined up like everybody else. And let me tell you something. When you see platforms that are big and they make a call for people to come up that have issues with drugs and addictions of all kinds, and the whole platform's full, wow. I was shocked because I thought I'd probably be the only one in there that had a problem. And so I wound up on that platform with many, many other people. And this gentleman started to speak to us and tell us about where we were and the redemptive plan of the Lord and how God could turn your life around, how things could shift from where you were and you could enter in to a completely different life and a completely different eternal life. So he said, do you want to invite Jesus into your life, in your heart? This is what you need to do. And he said, if you'll pray with me. So it's an act of your will. It's not, he's not forcing you to do anything. At that point, he's asking you, do you want to invite Jesus into your life? And at that point, I said yes, with everybody else that said yes. And he said, raise your hands. And I remember raising my hands and praying the prayer. And before you know it, I was on the floor. The power of God hit me, and something radically transformed my life. Because when I got up, it was almost like if you got in a fight and got knocked out, and then you wake up and you go, what happened? I looked around, what happened? What happened? I was shocked because this power that hit me, I realized that I was on the floor and no one punched me in the face. No one did anything like that. It was just something that happened that only could come from him. And in that moment, I stood back up and they're getting other people up. And at that point, I realized my prayer and inviting Jesus into my life, it had transformed me and turned me into a new creature at that moment when I accepted him. I remember coming off the platform as they released everybody. I remember going to the car after all the different things that still were going on. But the whole time I was in the sanctuary, I had drugs on me. And I'm saying, I got to get these drugs. I got to get rid of them. I got to get rid of them. No longer were they a part of me. There was a separation that happened that took me from where I was to a completely different place spiritually, because I'd become a new creature in Christ Jesus. And that old man, that insecure, young man who had all this stuff going on in his life, who had the drugs, who had all the partying, who had money, who had this so-called fame, who had an entourage around him, who had people that looked up to him and thought, wow, you're all that? I wasn't all that. Inside, I was dying. But Jesus came to save me. He gave me hope, and he gave me security, and he gave me a new life, an eternal life. And my life has been radically transformed ever since that day. The devil was after my life as long as I can remember. 10 years old, molestation. 15 years old, getting stabbed, almost dying. Tons of surgeries. I had 13, 14 major surgeries. Near-death experiences. Some of those things were very serious, especially when I got diagnosed with cancer. And I thought, that's it, I'm done. And at the time I had a wife and I had a son, and I thought I'm going to lose I'm not going to be here for my kids. I'm not going to be here for life. Life is over. I saw doom and gloom. other things in my life, just accidents I was in, car accidents, 5 car accidents, multiple cars, things happening, people sitting behind me in a car where I should have got my head blown off. All these kind of things in life and my journey that where the devil was pointing his finger at me and said, we're going to get that one. But God had other plans. But as I continued on this journey, until I found Jesus, my life was in danger. I had no protection at all. And so I found myself in a place desperate. And God sent somebody that would be willing to spend the time and the effort to share the truth of who He was. But all the things that I went through, it was all worth it to come to Jesus. That's the main thing for me. But that was worth it for this. This is my life now. I live a free life. I'm not in a prison cell. I'm not doing time. I'm not under anybody else's law. I'm under the law of the Lord. I live for Him and Him alone. I have a beautiful wife. I have beautiful children. I have beautiful grandchildren. And I have the freedom and liberty to see them and to be with them and to share the love of Jesus and share my heart and them share their heart with me. What a privilege it is to be on the other side. And I'm so grateful and so thankful. God supplied all my needs that I had, because you think living that kind of lifestyle that I lived before and now living a normal lifestyle, how am I going to make it? God's provision was always there for me. His provision was there for my health when I went through things. I don't know how many times that I was in a place where I was so desperate for God to intervene. And every time, I can tell you every time He showed up. But this is the reward of receiving Jesus. Not just golf, it's just an expression of freedom and liberation. Instead of being in bondage, a jail cell, it doesn't have to be a physical jail. It can be where you're living right now. And you're in a place where you feel like, I'm imprisoned. I can't get out. There's no way out for me. But there is a way out for you. There was a way out for me with all my trouble and all I went through. And it wasn't just one thing He did. It was multiple things He did. But there's only one way out. And the one way out is accepting Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. Then you can receive the freedom and liberty and the inheritance that belongs to a believer.